Alright, so now we're going to go over and kind of break down kind of the general process and strategy of how you approach something like this mock interview. Now we're not gonna go in and actually answer some of the questions here. We want you to go out, find the answers on Stack Overflow, or ask some of the coaches for BrainBloomer, and we will actually answer your emails. We will you can call us, you can contact us via email or forums, whatever it might be, and we will help you come to the right answer. It's important that you use these questions to determine the gaps in your knowledge, and you need to feel uncomfortable and you need to get stumped by some questions, right? Hopefully by the end of this entire process you're no longer stumped by anything. In fact, you know all of the answers to just about every question. This is just really like any kind of sport or anything you need to progress and become good at. You just have to practice, do a lot of repetition. You encounter things you never encountered before, and you fix the holes in your kind of interview game, if you will. So let's go and talk about what the interview was. So they basically call you on the phone and say, "Oh, hi, this is so and so." They introduce themselves and they ask you if it's a good time. Keep in mind, you can reschedule. It's not a strange thing to say, "Oh, something came up and I have to reschedule." Go ahead and reschedule if it's not a good time. If you're not mentally sharp enough, make sure you're on your A game when you're going into these interviews, because they all count. So if it is a good time, just go ahead and proceed. Make sure you have your laptop in front of you. Okay. So they're going to ask you to tell you a little bit about yourself to them. That's totally normal. It happens all kinds of interviews. In fact, even in your on-site, we're talking about the phone screen right now, but during your on-site, they're going to ask you the same thing, generally speaking, because people are busy. They're not going to read your resume. They get tens, like hundreds of resumes sometimes, depending on the company. But they probably don't really look in depth at your resume, and you're going to have to give them a 30-second elevator pitch about who you are, what you've been doing, that is palatable, hopefully in line with what they're looking for. Now, what you want to do before even going in and doing this interview is you need to determine what they're looking for. And if you still don't know what they're looking for when the time that up to the time that they call you, what you're going to have to do is really stop for a second and ask them what they're looking for. And the way you're going to do that is when they ask you something like, "Oh, so can you tell me a little bit about yourself?" You can say, "Oh yeah, sure, but I would like to actually get a better feel for what this position is looking for, so I can help you guys out." Something like that, right? So you're gonna basically try to figure out what the hiring manager or the person that's interviewing you, what kind of characteristics or traits or skills the position requires, because you need to know that so you can sell them on the idea that you can get that job done, that you're the right candidate for that position. So make sure you get your elevator pitch real sharp, and trust me, by the time your 9th interview comes along, you will be smooth. So next, what's going to happen is if all the personal fit questions go well, they're going to ask you things like, tell me a time where you face a tough challenge, yada yada. Make sure to keep it short, concise, and you want to kind of come across that you're a hardworking person, that you know your stuff, and that you can do a great job. You're not going to ruffle any feathers, and you're diplomatic. So those are generally the qualities that you want to convey in the fit questions. The technical questions are generally what the meat and potatoes of every technical phone screen. In these technical phone screens, what's going to happen is they're just going to give you they're going to blitz you with a lot of questions. It's going to be like trivia, like Jeopardy almost, but they're going to start out with a bunch of soft, short answer questions, which are generally like, "Oh, what is this? What is that?" And they're going to move into something more complex, which is asking you to do things. And if it's one of the bigger companies, the Fortune 10s of the world, they will ask you to code on something like GS Fiddle or Google Docs or some other platform where they could actually see you type. And they're going to give you questions for you to solve on the spot. So you're going to make sure you get enough practice with some of our other modules, which will prepare you for those technical interviews. Now for the softball questions where they just kind of blitz you, you're going to make sure that you have your computer in front of you and you're going to search for them on, say, Google or whatever your search engine of choice is, Stack Overflow, Bing, Stack Overflow, whatever, and you're going to look for the answers if you don't know them, right? You want to make sure that you take note of what they ask you if you get stumped, and if you're stumped, you need to start searching on Google, and trust me, you will find the answer within 10 seconds tops. You might have to delay, and if you really don't know what the answer is, you might have to just kind of try try to delay them a little bit and buy yourself some time while you're figuring out the answer. But you basically, at the end of it, after a number of interviews, you will be smooth, so don't worry about it. And if you are a pro member, you will have access to the interview question repository that will be around soon, and you will be able to ask any question and have it answered by our coaches here. In fact, you will be able to use this repository during your interview to find any questions that you might be needing. So it's going to be very helpful for pro members. Now you want to use these interviews to find all the gaps in your knowledge. And okay, so basically during a lot of these interviews, especially for the front-end positions, you're going to get asked a lot of JavaScript specific questions, and the one book that I said you shouldn't be without for JavaScript specific positions is Douglas Crockford's The Good Parts. You want to make sure you read that book, go over some of the lectures on YouTube by that guy, and most of the questions the interviewers will ask you are going to be right from his material, either in his lectures or in his book. And it's an easy read. It's only like 80 pages or less or something like that. The relevant stuff is like 50 pages, so do yourself a favor and go through that material. It'll take you a couple hours tops. And make sure you're going to have to make sure you're sharp on object-oriented programming, which we will have a module on if you're not familiar with those topics. And next will be algorithm questions. And these typically, you may get asked to actually write real code on an editor of some sort that they can see, like GSFiddle, Google Docs, all these things. And there's no way around this one. You really have to learn how to solve it. You can, in another browser tab, look for solutions to whatever they're asking you, but generally you want to be sharp enough to be able to solve and demonstrate your thought process while solving these problems. We will train you to be able to pass these, and just be aware that they're going to ask you a lot of very basic questions, and there are only so many variations. So after you go through the entire module that we provide, you will be sharp for this. Now, after all these technical questions, all the coding stuff, they're just going to ask you just a summary question, and it's going to be, do you have any questions for me? Whether the interview goes well or doesn't go well, they're going to ask you this question. And you want to get a general feel for kind of how you did, but most importantly in answering this question is you want to get the interviewer to feel that you are interested in the company. You want to ask things like, hey, what's the culture like? Or, what's it like to work there? And a little trick that can help you, it's not going to make the difference if you bombed your interview, but if you did reasonably well, it might be that extra 5 or 10% you need over the other candidates to get the position. Is you might want to say, try to push it into the interviewer's mind subconsciously that you are going to be the one accepting the job. You might ask things like, oh, so what kind of stuff will I be working on? Or who's going to be on my team? That kind of thing. And you can ask things like that, but just be tactful about it. You have to be careful about it. But in asking questions like that, it will subconsciously put it into the interviewer's mind that you will be working with them. And if all goes well, well, if you did really, really poorly, the interviewer will push back and basically saying, you will be able to pick up on whether or not you did well in the interview if you ask questions like that. So that's the interview breakdown For the technical questions, definitely visit the other modules and make sure you're sharp on them. And that is it for the mock interview.